Hi, I'm Jeffrey, and this is AutoAlchemy, the intersection between typology and self-growth. Today I'm putting on my primatologist hat to compare and contrast everyone's favorite chaos monkeys. Sit tight. Alright, so back in May I made my first ever compare and contrast typology video, and people really seemed to like that one, so I thought I'd give it another shot. One of the commenters on that last video actually asked if I would do a similar video for ENTPs and ENFPs because the commenter in question tends to score pretty closely on the thinking versus feeling dichotomy. Although I think this comparison will be a little bit trickier to pull off, I'm happy to give it my best go. It's understandable why somebody might have trouble deciding between these two types, and I hope that I can shed some kind of light for anybody out there facing a similar uncertainty. Before I dive in, I just want to let you guys know that for the rest of this video, I will be operating from within the objective personality paradigm. There are a lot of great typing systems out there, but this is kind of my preferred sandbox. So if you aren't familiar with Dave and Shan's work, you should definitely check them out. Okay, so let's get started by looking at the similarities between these two types. The core commonality between these types is that their first cognitive function is extroverted intuition, while their fourth is introverted sensing. But this core commonality can be differentiated into three basic similarities. The first thing that these types have in common is that they are both gather above organize. A basic principle of typology is the idea of binary coins. Humans unconsciously divide the world up into contrasting pairs and then will overly identify with one half of that divide while neglecting the other half. ENTPs and ENFPs both will prioritize the human need of gathering and generating more goodies at the expense of narrowing down and organizing. And that's not to say that they can't eventually come to appreciate a less is more approach to life, but their default mode of operating is going to kind of feel like enough is never quite enough. The next commonality between these two types is that they both have a preference for intuition over sensing. That is, they naturally seek solutions in the realm of patterns and possibility, often neglecting the concrete, tangible reality around them. As I mentioned with similarity number one, these types will naturally seek out more goodies, but I should clarify, ENTPs and ENFPs may indeed be pack rats, but they will be pack rats of a more abstract nature. They're prone to hoard new metaphors, new stories, new concepts. The third thing that these types have in common is that they are both single observers. That's a piece of objective personality terminology, and basically a single observer leads with either a sensing or intuitive function. So single observers are going to be more balanced when it comes to self and tribe thinking and feeling, but they are going to struggle to pivot between those abstract patterns and more concrete sensory data. They're going to be too all in one way or the other. As a visual, you might want to think of a seesaw that's stuck in place because there's this hyper heavy intuitive concept and no amount of little sensory data points is going to shift it. Single observers at their worst can get very conspiratorial. My ENFP X was somebody who was highly fascinated with the idea of the Mandela effect. 5G tower conspiracies are a more modern incarnation of the same kind of attitude run amok. Except the Mandela effect is real. You heard it here first. Berenstain forever. Anyway, with the similarities out of the way, we can now address the differences between ENTPs and ENFPs. As I mentioned before, these two types are a little bit trickier to distinguish than the ENTPs and INFJs, but the main point of difference we're going to examine is each type's relationship to thinking and feeling. Because I'm completely unbiased, why don't we start with the ENTPs? ENTPs use what is called introverted thinking. Introverted thinking is a subjective form of logic, and when I say that it's subjective, I don't mean that it's easily dismissed or that it's not worthwhile. In fact, in my opinion, some of the brightest minds out there have been introverted thinkers. One of my favorite introverted thinkers is Donald Hoffman, who has some pretty fascinating theories about the nature of consciousness. You should check him out. Anyway, subjective in this particular sense merely means that it pertains to the subjective experience. So the introverted thinker as a subject becomes the primary arbiter of what makes sense from a logical standpoint. And as a result of this, introverted thinking may go many layers deep, perhaps too many, as it strives to link together many personal ideas to form this logical daisy chain. Now, let's talk about the world of feelings. As a function, introverted thinking exists alongside extroverted feeling as part of the same binary coin. By the way, according to objective personality, some ENTPs will actually have a preference for introverted thinking, while others will have a preference for extroverted feeling. Hence the notion of jumpers or types that will leap over their second function to activate the third function. Jumper or no jumper, ENTPs will tend to view emotions and values as distributed across a collective, so matters of what matter are externally determined. The introverted thinking, extroverted feeling tension sometimes boils down to the low resolution idea that facts don't care about your feelings, although for jumper ENTPs, they will in fact sometimes prioritize the emotional experience of others at the expense of their own personal logic. For more on the different iterations of ENTPs, please check out my video, Am I ENTP? How to Know. Now we can turn to the ENFPs. When it comes to logic, ENFPs use what's called extroverted thinking. Extroverted thinking is less concerned with the question of, does this make sense to me as a subjective experience? Instead, it involves glancing at the objective spectrum of rationale, logic, thought. As a result, it tends to sacrifice logical depth for logical breadth, for a pragmatic reasoning that can effectively satisfy the needs of the collective. Extroverted thinking is contrasted with introverted feeling as part of the same coin/axis. For introverted feeling, questions of what truly matters are intensely personal, which is why introverted feeling has historically been associated with the idea of authenticity. Although I do challenge that idea a little bit in this video. Now you may recall how in my ENTP INFJ compare and contrast, I used the advanced typing tool of leveraging the different animal stacks as a way of zeroing in on type. Unfortunately, you can't really do that with ENTPs and ENFPs. As you can see here, the animal distributions of ENTPs and ENFPs are exactly the same. That's why this is such a tricky pairing. Another rather unsophisticated tool that you could use for typing yourself is to compare yourself to verified ENTPs and ENFPs. But that process can quickly become pretty subjective, so I only encourage you to do it as a last resort after you've already gone through a more deliberate process like I've demonstrated here. So, to sum it all up, for ENTPs, logic is personal, while values are collective, and for ENFPs, logic is collective, while values are personal. Standard ENTPs will embody the mantra, I have to pursue what is true, regardless of their feelings. Jumper ENTPs will embody, I have to honor what matters to others, regardless of whether it makes sense to me. Standard ENFPs will embody the mantra, I have to follow what matters, regardless of whether it works for others. Jumper ENFPs will embody, I have to make things work for others, regardless of my feelings. Anyway, I hope that this was helpful to somebody out there. Instead of dealing with low-resolution stereotypes of each personality, I think that the path I've demonstrated here is the best way to get at figuring out what your personality is. It's best to break things down into workable pieces and then proceed with caution. Thank you guys so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing. I'll see you next time.